Johnson criminal defense attorney, Alex Ferrer, the former police officer and a former Florida Circuit Court judge and host of television's Judge Alex, and Sunny Hostin, CNN legal analyst, who is a former federal prosecutor herself. I'd forgotten about the George Zimmerman audio. I'd forgotten about that. You know, Janet, before now, we had no video or audio of the actual shooting. I mean, is the discovery of this audio, if it is indeed the audio, is it a game changer?
You know, I don't think it is, and I think it's the defense. I could easily spin this that, you know, the criticism of Officer Wilson was, why didn't he just shoot to disable him? As a defense lawyer, I'm already getting my story together where I can argue he was shooting to disable him, and then he thought he was disabled, and he lunged at him, and that's when he had the kill shot. That's what that gap is. So I think both sides can spin it, and when that happens, the defense can argue this is reasonable doubt when both sides are equal.
Sonny, who do you think this supports? Does it support the witness, Dorian Johnson? Does it support the police officer side of the story? Because we heard in that recording at least 10 shots, and then there was a quick series of shots followed by a pause, and then another succession of shots.
Well, I don't think we really know what the police officer's story is because we haven't heard from him firsthand. Don, and even the police incident report that's been released is so heavily redacted, you really don't know, I think.
But initially we did hear from Ferguson police where they said, you know, there was a struggle at the car. Remember
yeah,
that?
but I just don't think we really know his account. But I think in terms of the 5 eyewitnesses that their testimony, or rather their depiction of the events that I've reviewed, I think the pause in the shots actually corroborates their version of events. It's very clear to me that every single one of them say that there were these shots, and then Michael Brown stopped, turned around, and put his hands up. I think then that this is extremely significant, evidence for the prosecution. I think that jurors who listen to evidence, quite frankly, usually don't take their common sense hat off, and the argument that somehow someone that's being shot somehow an unarmed person charges at an armed police officer just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Sonny, they say that all the time. Well, as a defense lawyer, I hear that all the time. Officers say that my clients, after getting tased, have superhuman strength. Now, whether that's how they perceive it or whether it's true, I don't know. But the officers say that all the time.
Yeah, not to mention that perpetrators do things all the time you wouldn't anticipate. I can't tell you the number of times as a police officer I had somebody in the back of the police car handcuffed, taking him to the jail, and looked over at the car next to me and saw a family horrified because the perpetrator was smashing his head on the cage. And yet, when you get in court, the lawyers look at the jury and go, "Oh, come on, the guy smashed his own head on the cage."
Well,
yeah,
Alex, I mean, that may be the case, but you have so many eyewitnesses, quite frankly, that
Sonny,
are not
can I
saying
say
that.
this?
They're saying something that's different.
Well, that's eyewitnesses. Those are the eyewitnesses, excuse me, we know of, because some of the eyewitnesses that we are hearing from sources, there are at least a handful or maybe a dozen eyewitnesses who are corroborating the police officer side of the story, but they don't want to be part of the media spectacle. They don't want their names out there.
Well, I haven't heard from any witnesses like that. Perhaps other people have, but again, from what we know at this point, I think that the pause in the shots, quite frankly, corroborate a lot of the evidence or depictions, at least at this point.
I totally disagree. I totally disagree.
Yeah,
I think
that
the pause in the shooting is going to be spun by both sides. People form their opinions originally based on their own life perceptions. The people who feel this was an unjustified shooting are going to say that pause gave the officer time to premeditate the killing. The people who feel it's a justified shooting are going to say he shot him and stopped, and since he was still coming, he shot some more. And the reality is that the harm is not that people form their opinions immediately. The harm is that people form fixed opinions. And then when facts like this come in, they're not willing to change their mind. They're willing to form it into their story or say, oh, it's not credible, it's not believable. That's the problem.
And it's a reasonable officer, too. I mean, it's a reasonable person standard. So it comes from the officer's testimony. And the officer, unfortunately, is the only person who's alive between the two of them. So he's going to say.
But there are reports out there
We're going to have other forensics.
And
we're going to have other forensics, and we're going to have other witnesses. But we just have to wait for all that to come in. And I'm not a big believer that the police should be letting out all their evidence, because when they do, this is why police say an investigation is pending, we can't comment. Because when they let out the evidence they have, people come out of the woodworks with stories that fit into that evidence.
Okay, but stand by. Hold that thought. We'll get into it. I'm going to let you guys. I'm going to let you finish. But there are reports that people are fitting their testimony to what they hear witnesses on television saying. We're going to talk about that. And also, if it is authentic, how would the audio compare with other aspects of this case that we already know about? That's next.